we wanted to bring back Menta Meter to get your feedback on today's session. And what we hear from you will be very important for us going into day 2 on Thursday. So Chad, did you want to bring up the Menta Meter information again?
Sure. So to get to the Menta Meter, I'll remind everybody that you can either go to this link on a web browser or your phone and enter the code on the right here. That'll stay up the entire time, or I put a link into the chat for everyone. You can just click that and it'll take you right to this slide to answer the question on this slide.
So, and this code will be good for the remainder of the questions, right? You're not going to put a new code in or anything.
Yes, it will.
Okay. So if you're on Menta Meter and you punch the code in, you should have this question. And yes, okay, people are ahead of me. So what do you think is the most important FIRO decision support need? Needs should drive the product. So you heard a lot about various components. We got a nice inventory of kind of what's out there. There are some tangibles and some intangibles, and maybe things that we haven't touched on with the tools that were presented today. So please think about this from your perspective. And we don't know yet. I mean, part of this, as Mike Anderson pointed out, which I should have known the answer to, but I guess it became apparent in graphic relief when he answered it. We don't have anything like this anywhere else. I thought we had approached something like this in the Russian River, but we don't have anything like this anywhere else. And there's a movement to try to do a lot more FIRO nationwide. So what we do here is going to be, really groundbreaking. It gives us a lot of room to innovate because it's the first. So we really need to get some good drivers down. What are the need drivers for the decision support system that we are going to build to make FIRO operational? So I'll give other folks a couple minutes. I'm going to punch my own answer in there. Okay, so I'll just take a quick look. And what we do with this is kind of look for some common elements. We're looking for what's the range of responses, but also, what kind of themes begin to pop up, because that means that there's multiple users that have common needs. So forecast, scale, and timing of near-term AR strikes. AR interagent, that first one, whoever submitted it, once I read through a couple of others, I'd like to come back to you if you're willing to share a little bit more about that, because that's really intriguing. Interagency coordination, absolutely. Understanding of forecast skill and reliability. There's forecast skill again. Wet events, dry events. Dry event skill seems pretty good already. It's the wet events. Confidence in the reliability of inflow forecast. Boy, the forecast skill is up there. Agency coordination again, third time. Use of forecast info from various sources. So looking at what's out there, synthesizing it quickly to inform decisions. AR projections, quantify forecast uncertainty. Again, wow, that jumps to the top. AR projections, a better understanding of ensembles. Well, the AR projections, again, I think is forecast skill. Real-time accurate forecast info to drive FIRO decisions. Similar theme there, consistent pathways for tools and share. That's interesting. Yeah, making sure we have a place everybody can go that's consistent and reliable so that we're all using the same information. Understand range of possible outcomes. Okay, that's interesting. Looking at what that range might be and understanding that. And I think that's part of what Chris presented in particular. Forecast on operational. Okay, so we got a lot of forecast skill, a lot of that, and interagency coordination. I want to go back, if the very first comment, I want to start with if that person would be willing to identify themselves, forecast scale and timing. I would love to hear more about that. I don't know, Rami, if it's possible to, for someone to, does everybody have the ability to unmute themselves and speak?
They should, Arleen.
Okay.
That was me. This is Derek Louie of the Coordinated Reservoir Operations Unit, who put that one in there, I guess. And so just as the ARs come in, one of the most useful pieces of information is like how big it is and when is it coming. That was generally what I meant by that.
Okay, great. So any observation, I mean, my observation in seeing all these is the FIRO decision support need really focuses a lot on forecast accuracy, forecast skill, getting projections right, and getting them into that decision-making framework. That's and then of course the coordination and everybody having access. So those are very very crystal clear needs. And the forecast uncertainty and the forecast skill, I mean, that's something that is definitely a high priority that's come out of this poll. Anyone want to comment on this? Rob, John, James, any surprises here? Roger or Chris?
I'll chime in. I mean, I guess I would say I definitely agree that the forecast skill is really important, but also I would say equally important is an operation that fully leverages that skill, because you could have an operation that has a perfect forecast, and if it's not utilizing it well, it would not operate well. So I think those go in tandem. And so you need both. You need both good forecasts and an operation that fully leverages that forecast.
That's a really good point that I kind of skirted over. So thank you. That connection is absolutely good. Other folks want to comment on this?
Yeah, Arleen, I would just add that I think it's a good segue into day 2 of our symposium.
Yeah, it certainly is. So folks involved in day 2, take note. Make sure you really hit this hard. Any other comments?
Arleen, I actually had a question for the group. I don't know if this is the right avenue, but forecast uncertainty, the quantification of forecast uncertainty came up quite a bit. And one of my questions is there particularly lead time where it's most relevant? Or is it all times?
Yeah, so that's, what is the critical lead time? Is there a critical lead time that's most important? Who wants to take that? Patrick Singh. Patrick, you want to unmute your line and verbalize?
Sure. I typed this in the comment, but I'll also verbalize it. So I think the lead time that's necessary depends on what amount of space of the reservoir you want to utilize for FIRO. I mean, if you're utilizing, let's say, 5,000 acre-feet of storage, you may only need a lead time of a couple of days. But if you want to utilize 10,000 acre-feet or 15,000 acre-feet, then that lead time needs to be extended. So specific to Lake Mendocino, where we've been experimenting with FIRO, we've been using about 11,000 acre-feet of reservoir space for that research and development. And under that amount of space, we would typically need about 3 to 5 days of lead time in order to implement FIRO in a manner where we're not, running with our heads off and doing emergency release changes. So I think the lead time required would depend on the amount of storage that's going to be utilized for FIRO. And obviously every reservoir is different because every reservoir has its own little quirks. Like Lake Mendocino, for example, operates through a power plant. So if we needed to make a significant release, I would have to coordinate with the local agency there to make sure everyone's on the same page about how we make releases. But I really do believe that lead time ties directly into how much of the reservoir you want to use for FIRO. Because if you're using a small amount of space, then really you don't need that much lead time. But I think ultimately the goal is to use a bigger amount of space for FIRO, and therefore we would need that significant amount of lead time.
And to add on to that, I would also say that your downstream channel capacity and your forecast for your downstream locations would also come into account for that as well. You know, someone wrote confidence and reliability of inflow forecast. Like I could have wrote that myself. That's actually what I was typing before it got sent. So, you know, looking also like how much can you release and then what's happening downstream, and the confidence with that would go along with what Patrick said.
So in a way, it's kind of a chicken and an egg. You say, well, what's the forecast skill? But then it's like, well, the forecast skill, you know, the lead time really depends on, you know, what the storage requirements are and what the downstream capacity is. Is there a way to kind of test that out? Like, I know in Lake Mendocino, we kind of said, well, let's just look at 10,000 acre feet. What would that look like? Is that something we should be doing to see what forecast lead time would be required depending on some what if scenarios? And maybe that's part of our PVA scope and I'm just blanking on it.
Potentially, you know, an easy, quick way to look at it too is like, okay, how much are you encroaching the flood space? Let's say it's 10,000 acre feet. And then what's your channel capacity and your release ability at that particular storage level? So like, if you can get 10,000 acre feet out of the project in a half a day, then that would be different than, you know, Lake Mendocino, where it takes a little longer to get 10,000 acre feet out of the reservoir. So that's a quick calculation on how you could figure out that, but looking into those things that you said, Arleen, I don't think it's a bad idea.
Anyone else want to comment on this? I'm wading into dangerous territory here. Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no absolute answer to that overall question. I mean, we could certainly conjure up scenarios under average conditions, but the lead time requirement is highly conditioned upon the current state of the reservoir system and the watershed and the impending weather. So, I mean, there's times, you know, you could be interested in longer lead times, and there's times when everything swings on the next 12 hours. So there's no absolute answer to that. There might be a maximum lead time at which point there's no skill in the forecast. But you know, that's part of it. But I think that there are times when the lead time is interesting or is important you know, in different lengths depending on the situation. We'll just see that over time.
Other thoughts on this?
I guess I think to add on to Rob, you really need to tease out that lead time question through, you know, simulation of different events and scaled events to really get a better understanding of that. Because like Rob said, it's so much a function of, you know, current conditions, current reservoir storage, and then the forecasted conditions as well. So yeah, I think, and you know, that's potentially part of the process of what our resources engineering group. So hopefully we'll have some more information through this PVA.
Thanks, Chris. Any of the other panelists want to comment on this? This is a really important topic. Or anyone. All right, well, this is really good feedback and lots of food for thought here on how we move forward in trying to answer this question. So thank you for that. Glad we asked. So Chad, we have, I think, one or two more questions. So let's go to the next one. Next question, please. Based on the needs of, I feel like I'm the Jeopardy host here. Only I should be providing the answers. Based on the needs of the reservoir operators. Okay, so we got some on the line here. What forecast tools / products may be most useful to aid operator decisions? So we're looking, you know, there's a plethora of tools and products out there, but from the operator's perspective and making decisions, What are some, and maybe there's more than one. Yeah, there could be more than one that you would really go to. What are your go-to must-have, needs to be reliable to base your decisions on? We all know there's a lot at stake here, and I'm going to answer this. Okay, I'll give everybody another couple minutes. There's a lot of consistency on this one too. Okay. So one more minute. I don't see a, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so everybody can read the same words I can, but just to play narrator here. So we've got inflow volume, stream flow volume, inflow forecasts, scheduled releases from, so we've got the incoming and the outgoing. How much water is coming in? What are the releases going out? What's coming in from the sides? So up, down, and sideways. An upstream, oh yes, for multiple reservoir systems, know what's happening upstream with reservoir ops is critical. And I think we'll be doing more of the multiple reservoir systems in the future. So integrated inflow forecasts. This is interesting. So precip forecasts and location, freezing temp. Yeah, that's knowing what the baseline conditions are to get a much more accurate view of what's coming in. And we got AR landfall predictability. If you could scroll up again a little bit, I think I missed a couple. So there were some on the FCO. Yeah, so I mean, that FCO DSS is a vote of confidence for what's there now. Not that there can't be enhancements, but that coordinated operations system is really key. Along with, these good forecast volumes coming in from various directions under various conditions. So scroll back down again. Let's see what we have. Integrated inflow forecast ResSim downstream routing tool. AR landfall predictability. So I'd love to hear, there's a couple things. I'd love to hear some comments. The AR landfall predictability, I'd love to hear like what exactly, how precise does that AR landfall prediction should it be? I'd also love to hear about this integrated inflow forecast ResSim, that's routing tool. A little bit more about that. So I'll just ask for those folks who put those comments in, or were even thinking about those. I'd love to hear a little bit more to start the conversation with those two, because they're a little different. A lot of the other ones are, fairly consistent. Well, the internet, yeah, you need to have that internet on. So I'll open it up for comments on the AR landfill prediction. What do you need there that we don't have now? Because we have something. We have the AR landfall tool. So we'll start with that on AR landfall prediction. Anyone want to comment on what the needs are there for operators? And Patrick, not to pick on you again, but I know you do use the AR landfall tool. So any comment on what enhancements might be helpful to you would be really good to hear.
So you're correct, Arleen. I do use the AR landfall tool to a certain extent. I think it's a really useful tool for briefing, my management, because it visually just gives them an idea of what could be approaching the California coast and giving them awareness of, operations that we may be doing in the future. So having that accurate obviously would be great, because if you present graphic to the kernel 5 days out that says a storm is coming, and then 5 days later that changes, obviously that's not the greatest of developments. So having that accuracy would be great. But I think from an operator standpoint, the AR landfall tool, while is useful from a qualitative standpoint. From a quantitative standpoint, I'm looking at the inflow volume forecast more specifically, because that's what really guides the operations that we do. And I'm sure Jenny can speak to this. Each dam has its little quirks about how it operates, and knowing what that volume could be really changes our operations. So an example at Lake Mendocino is that if I was to get an inflow volume forecast of about, let's say, 20,000 acre feet over 5 days, I would operate one way versus if I got an inflow volume forecast of, say, 45,000 acre feet. So if you have different volume forecasts, how we operate could change in terms of, what service gates we use. Do we want to take power plant operations offline and so forth? That's what I'm looking for in terms of these inflow volume forecasts. So getting that, more accurate in the future will make our job that much easier, and it'll make it that much easier to implement FIRO as well.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. So getting the inflow forecasts more accurate. There were a couple of precipitation forecasts and location freezing temperature elevations. Are there particular aspects of inflow forecasts where we need to improve to get a better prediction of inflow volume? And I'm thinking freezing,
Yeah, I mean, just speaking to, again, Lake Mendocino in particular, it seems like in the 5 years that I've been doing this line of work, the inflow forecasts have been pretty good when it's dry weather forecasted, and that makes it pretty, reliable to use. So at Lake Mendocino for water year 20, when we had some rain come in and it filled up the reservoir, and then we had a series of dry periods forecasted, the Corps had a fair amount of what's the word I'm looking for? Confidence that we could rely on that forecast, and we held on to that water, and that's proven to be pretty important because we now have had drought since then. So we held on to that 10,000 acre feet of water based on the fact that we know that those dry weather forecasts are reliable. The previous year, we had a lot of wet events, and the magnitude of those inflow volume forecasts seemed to be, pretty variable 5 days out versus 1 day out. But luckily, we had prepared for every possible scenario, so we were prepared for that. But in general, it just seems like those wet weather inflow volume forecasts tend to be very variable, and you have to take that into account, while these dry weather inflow forecasts seem to be pretty reliable, and that has made our operations a lot easier under those scenarios.
And let me ask a dumb question. So the inflow forecasts are variable because the precip forecast changes?
I believe so, because they're all tied, right? You have a precip forecast that feeds a hydrology model, and the hydrology model provides inflow forecasts. So if you have variable precipitation, then you have variable inflow volume forecasts.
That gets back to the AR predictability again.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this? I'll open it up to others on the panel or other participants. Okay, well, with that then, thank you. I think that's really good fodder leading into Thursday's sessions. So Roger, I think you're gonna talk a little bit about day 2, and then Tracy and John will wrap up today.